beautiful woman next to me is Joelle Dunlap. And I have to tell you, before I go into her bio, I'm going to tell you a funny story. Um, because it just shows how we have these like we create we create like projections onto people. And and Joelle's going to get a kick out of this. So basically, when I first was introduced to Joelle was listening to her on the Journey On podcast. And she was talking about the nonprofit she started, Square Peg, and about all the things they were doing and all that. And I thought that this woman was the most grown up and like professional and um, really killing the adulting aspect of things. And I was not worthy. Like I really thought like, wow, she's a real adult. And then I met her.
Oops.
And she is the warmest, funniest, most down to earth, salt of the earth person that you could ever meet. And I think that some of the stories I asked her if she would be willing to tell are just such a testament to how people are drawn to her. And I think that the reason that that is, one of the reasons that that is that Joelle is always authentically herself. And it doesn't mean, I know this, and I'm so sorry, Joelle, because I know how uncomfortable it is when people rave about you. And it's like publicly, I'd rather have it in writing so that nobody has to see my face or I don't have to perform. But, and she's not authentic because she's, you know, just the most confident person in the world and just she's authentic because even if she is feeling insecure or unsure of the situation, she still shows up as herself. And it's so inspiring to me. Um, and like the whole idea of Team Quirky and, you know, her wonderful TED Talk at or TikTok at the summit on flatulence was that maybe part of it? Yep. Uh, one thing is that Joelle never takes anything too seriously, even though the work she does is so serious and important. So I'm so happy that she can be here with us today. And I am going to quickly read her bio, which is nothing. It just scratches the surface of everything that she does, everything that she has created. So I'm in the wrong place. You guys, I love that you deal with me with all of my technological challenges. So let's see. I've got this. Okay. All right. So this is just a blurb, and we're going to go deeper into this. So Joelle founded Square Peg in 2004, which is a program that provides participants with recreational, vocational, and educational opportunities in a working ranch setting on the San Mateo Coast and in Sonoma County. At Square Peg, we turn I wish into I can. We believe that the world doesn't need more conformity, it needs more compassion, creativity, and connection. We create a safe and joyful space where neurodivergent youth, their families, and rescued racehorses rewrite their stories together. Joelle was also featured recently in the documentary film Rescued Hearts that has been having screenings across the country and been winning awards. So that feels like a drop in the ocean, but we'll start here. So thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for hanging out with me.
And I would just like to point out that you have great lighting and great hair. So
I have
getting,
painted the wall purple yesterday. It
you did?
was raining, and so when you've got a can of purple paint, you find a wall. And I'm kind of stoked with how this looks. So yeah.
No, it looks great. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. So tell us a little bit about, I'm curious. I know that you and I have talked about this before, but I find it such an interesting story. Um, if you could maybe talk about what led you to start Square Peg.
Um, One, I wanted to figure out how I could just spend all day with my horses. Um, but I had uh, I was coming out of a divorce, and my ex-husband and I had a racehorse stable, and that was his life. And so I walked away from everything at the track. I wanted him to have that. And and I had a few horses, and I had started a riding program, and I was also sales repping in the equestrian world. I was repping a line of custom saddles and a supplement that a local vet here had put together. And the riding school just did really well. I had a partner in the riding school, and she and I had it worked out where I taught 3 days a week, she taught 3 days a week. We got along really well with how to take care of the horses. And um, and I got this reputation for kind of leaning into the kids that were harder. And
Mhm.
he had this real knack with particularly kids and adults that were really serious riders. And I wanted the shy ones, I wanted the goofy ones. I really felt like this has to be fun rather than serious. And so it worked out really well. She took the serious ones, I took the ones she didn't want to take, and we both thought that we were getting the better end of the deal. And um and so and I got this reputation for taking kids that were tough. And I really, really, really liked it. And years before, I had a little riding school. The first riding school that I had was through a Montessori school in Sacramento. And one of the parents of a couple of kids said, "Hey, my teenage daughter is having a really tough time. Can she come and work for you?" I said, "Absolutely." And she was an awkward kid, and she was an angry kid. And I showed up one morning, and she's in the pasture, and she's just got her arms wrapped around my big old goofy thoroughbred, and she's just sobbing, just little 14-year-old tears. And I had mentored her a lot, talked to her a lot, and I looked over and I watched this horse, and he wasn't solving anything for her. He wasn't saying all the right things. He was just there, and he didn't move. And I thought, there's a there there. Something is happening here. And this horse is offering her something that nobody else is. And I think that was really kind of the little grain that started the pearl. So then years later, as I found myself teaching again, I got the angsty teens, which I still love. Um,
Why do you think that is?
because you're helping.
Mhm.
Nobody ever changed the world because they posted on the correct diagonal. Like, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't improve the world. But, adolescence is a tough time. It's a tough
Mhm.
for girls, and you watch their bodies change and their brains change. And you realize just having that third space, having that healthy place to be. And Christine, you and I have shared this, when you don't have a healthy place,
Mhm.
you recognize the value that I've created a safe, healthy place to be. I'm,
Mhm.
I'm doing something good here just by creating this space. And Square Peg really grew out of that.
Mhm.
Um, Coupled with the fact that my son um, was a very phonetic learner, and he was born in the mid 80s. And we didn't have language for that. We still called kids hyperactive, or and I mean, we still medicate kids like that. And I was a very young mom, and I didn't know what was wrong with him, but I knew that the meds they were prescribing were going to cause him to lose his appetite and quit sleeping. I knew that if he quit sleeping, we were in a complete free fall. And as young as I was, I advocated and I said, we're not doing that. And it didn't go well. The schools pushed back really, really, really hard, and school was torturous for him. It was awful. And so after a couple of violent episodes at the school, I had to pull him out of school. I had to homeschool, and I learned way more than he did. But we, out of desperation, I was climbing trees with him and reading books, because suddenly if you're in a tree, it's a whole lot more interesting. And I was finding books that were interesting to him rather than academically. And then we would game the system together, because we were doing an independent study program. And of course, I was still working 2 and 3 jobs at the track at the time. And so we would go on a Monday, and we would go to the little art house theater in Berkeley, and we would watch a foreign film, because we would have to log hours, and that meant
Mhm.
2 hours of a foreign language, 2 hours of history, 2 hours of art, and 2 hours of reading, because we had to read the subtitles. So schoolwork, and then we could go up to Tilden Park and go swimming. Oh, I started gaming the education system pretty early, and so Square Peg was just a natural way to take that and do it better, where I wasn't running in emergency mode, that I could thoughtfully design a third space that was healthy and safe for people. Um, Create a safe space for the horses, because again, I had left the track, but there were still a whole lot of ex-race horses that weren't going to make sport horses, and they needed a home too. And so it just, in an odd sort of way, it made sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a question as a former single mom who also worked 3 jobs at times. How did you homeschool and work 3 jobs?
Um, Again, one of my jobs was I ran the video room at the racetrack at night at Golden Gate Fields. And Golden Gate Fields just shut down. It was the track in Berkeley, and it was actually terraced into the rock, that looked out over the San Francisco Bay. My office had a world-class view, but the video room was actually like down in the guts of the building, and there were no windows. And I would, take him to work with me, because you're kind of like the Maytag repairman down there. There's really not a whole lot to do once you get the signal up. And we would work there. He ran around the racetrack during the day with my ex-husband, who was not paying attention. And the racetrack was a union shop. And so all of the security guards were ex-cops, most of them who had been injured on the job in Oakland and in San Francisco. They took him under their wing. He loved guns. He's a boy. I hated guns, but they taught him, you know,
Mhm.
how a police officer takes care of guns. The guys in the construction yard, they took care of him, and I realized that mentorship and side-by-side project-based learning is really where it's at. It's what makes a lasting um, impression. And he did. I mean, he was walking hot racehorses at 11 years old, and He, um, his Spanish is pretty darn good. He had better Spanish than my ex did, and so he would he would tell the grooms what to do. Basically, he would tell them to do his job so that he can play video.
Game in the system. Where do you learn that?
Yeah, right. So, it was not ideal. It was project-based learning in a big way. And so, I didn't have a choice. Um, but it does take a village, and the people that mentored him stepped up in some really beautiful ways to deal with a system that had failed him in a really miserable way. And it wasn't perfect. I mean, I
Mhm.
redo 95% of the whole thing, but I think most parents believe that. But that 5 to 10% was really, really beautiful. And it was mostly people that just cared.
Mhm.
And they knew that I was working like mad. They knew that we had, a struggling little barn. And they just cared, and they just liked him, and they just saw a little boy that had to run around and touch things. And, most of us, I think, are horse people here. And so, um, you know, has anybody ever met a farrier that wasn't neurodiverse? Like, right? I always say there's two kind of farriers, like really good ones and ones that show up on time. Like the Oregon really aren't that talented. That's obviously a gross overstatement, but
But
farriers there, they have to work with their hands, they have to work with animals, they love shaping things. They are almost by definition ADD, ADHD.
Mhm.
Looking at people, they'd much rather be with animals. And of course, my son is now a certified farrier. So, um,
Well, one of the things that is such a marker. I mean, everybody would like this, but this is such a marker for ADHD is the need for novelty.
yeah, yeah.
And I think, I look back and I go, oh, well, that makes sense of why I loved bartending and I would bartend in music venues. So, I mean, sorry to anybody that may have been a regular at the bar, but like regulars were like, please, like you hear the same stories, the same bad jokes that like, oh no, here he comes, right? So the idea of every night was different. You didn't know, you may or may not know the band. You don't know the clientele. You don't know how much money you're going to make. You don't know what, so there was always this like aspect of novelty to it. And I imagine there's an aspect of that with being a farrier because you're meeting new people, new horses. You never like, what is the horse going to be like today? I don't know. We'll find out. But when we were talking about homeschooling, it reminded me this is such a big family joke of when I homeschooled for a minute. Basically, my kids skipped middle school, you might as well say, in a lot of ways, because we were living in Vancouver and I wasn't there illegally, but I wasn't there legally. It's kind of like when you're American and you go to Canada, they call us pole swingers, right? So the idea is not in the way you might think. Uh, the idea is that you can stay for 6 months, but then you have to leave and come back. So that's what I would do. Like before the 6 months was over, I would go back to the US and then I would go back into Canada. But I wasn't legally able to put my kids in school there. So we put them in this private school that turned out to be a Scientology school that we didn't know.
It's the
So
same,
I have so many funny stories
right?
about slowly figuring that out. Um, a lot of jokes there too. And then um, just because, like, if you don't know your kids are in a Scientology school, there is a learning curve coming that things that you start to scratch your head about. So we took them out of there eventually. And I was like, I'll homeschool. And I had no access to materials. I didn't know anything about homeschooling. So I have one kid that should be in, I think, the eighth grade, seventh into eighth, and then another one that was like supposed to be in fifth grade. So I would go to Barnes and Noble and get like workbooks, but they only went up to like
Fourth
sixth
grade.
grade. So my daughter's there like doing these really easy things, and my son was really smart. So the joke was always about homeschool because there was no homeschool. It was me handing them things going, I don't know, do this or giving them reading assignments or so I applaud you for actually having curriculum and figuring things out in the way you did. Because if we think about it, it's so crazy that we take kids who have all this energy and excitement and wonder about the world and we make them sit in a chair in a room that is made of concrete and steel, and we make them sit there under these the fluorescent lights, and there's somebody in front of the room that's just talking or like that's why good teachers are worth their weight in gold. If you could take that environment and make it fun and interactive and interesting. But it would be really great to see more kinesthetic learning happening in schools where people don't have $20,000 a year to send their kid to a private school that offers that. So, but that's another story for another time. But you created the kinesthetic learning for a community that really needed it.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's, I feel like a Disneyland dad sometimes, right? Because we don't have a lot of deliverables that we have to make. And so we we get to make it fun without the expectation of an outcome, which, as we know with horse training, when you give up the expectation of an outcome, guess what? You're
Everything
suddenly
goes well.
going well, and the learning curve, it just takes this complete other trajectory. Um, and there's something to be said about that. And so here we are 22 years later. Yeah, which that has been wild to wrap my head around, like that we've made it this far. I think we have 7 full-time employees, and another 5 part-time. Plus our job training program, we have 11 people that are paid interns. They're all making $20 an hour, working anywhere from 2 to 20 hours a week, and those are all people with an autism diagnosis. And that, out of all these years, that may be to date my proudest accomplishment.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
this is why I love that you always show up.
mm,
Because what if you said, well, who am I? Who am I to work with neurodivergent or autistic youth? Who am I to step into that role? I have a question like, were you nervous at all when you had your first client that definitely needed that extra? Well, let me put it this way. Like, if I was a parent of a child underserved in this way and that has a high level of needs, I might be, wanting to know, well, okay, what are you going to offer? And maybe if I was you, I would be like, oh gosh, what expectations do they have of me? And am I going to be able to meet those? Because anything can happen.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the saddest answer to that is, the bar is so low.
Mm.
And if you are, if the only thing that you are is kind and cognizant that all people deserve dignity, you're already you're already ahead of the game. But to your question of, was I scared? Did I doubt? all the time.
Mhm.
Uh, but I remember about, because I just ran into this mom the other day. So this was probably 12 years ago. This mom called and her son he was probably 7 or 8. And he wasn't sleeping. And he was an eloper, meaning he would go out the door and run down the street and go through open doors of other houses and go through their stuff. And he would do that late at night, so she wasn't sleeping. And he had a younger sibling. He still has a younger sibling who, took on the responsibility of, always like cold tracking him through all these crazy things. And so, of course, the parents had all this guilt that their younger siblings' childhood was being, commandeered. Um, and mom would come out unannounced, just pull up. Both the kids would get out of the car, and then she would crawl over to a little porch swing that we had, and she'd curl up and she'd fall asleep. And we were like, okay, I don't know how long they're going to be here. They're not on the schedule, don't actually have any staff available, but we got to serve this family. And he was scary because he did things that he was hard to understand verbally. You didn't know what was going to happen. He had toileting issues. And so, like, one time we had a pond on the property and we took him up and he was running around in the tule reeds. And then we're like, he's naked in the tule reeds. I don't know where his clothes are. Right? And we're like, how are we going to explain this to mom? Like, we on the hill. And so we decided that he was Lord Godiva because we had to get him on the horse to get him down there back to mom because he's running all over naked. And so we made up this whole thing where we got him on the pony because he was Lord Godiva and he was going to ride through and he was going to relieve everybody of taxes and, he was going to be the hero. And we had this whole elaborate thing and the sister bought in and and we got back down to the barn with the naked child. And and of course, he'd had a toileting issue in the Tules and was embarrassed, and his clothes were soiled, so he just took them off. Um, but we did it, and we managed to wrap a saddle blanket around him, and get him in the car and get him home safely. Um, but it was, and then I remember another time he showed up and I was schooling my horse and, as typical trainer, bullshit, my horse was tough, and whether I made him tough or whether I was drawn to him because he was tough doesn't matter. But he was a hot horse and we were doing cool things. And this little boy was in a spot where, he wasn't really that interested in riding. And he shows up out of the blue and he walks right up and he says, I want to ride your horse. And I'm like, oh God, this horse is capable of some pretty acrobatic moves. And I had to take a deep breath and kind of look at the horse like, are you going to do this? And that was the day that that horse transitioned into showing us that he was a brilliant program horse, one of the best ever. We lost him in February. Um, but I don't know how long I would have taken to transition him to a program horse had that child not demanded, I'm getting on your horse right now. And that was where the rubber hit the road. And the horse showed me that he had been ready for quite some time. Um, Anyway, it probably sounds really irresponsible to a lot of people to have these naked children running around, snorting chestnut thoroughbreds, but that's kind of the nature of Square Peg. And 22 years later, we've got an amazing safety record, and it's mostly the generosity of the horses and being obsessive people thinking about how nervous systems work and how to help regulate the horse so that they can deliver that regulation to people. but that's something I could talk about ad nauseum.
Well, some people would hear that story and go, wow, like that sounds like the most amazing job to do for a career. And other people would hear that and go, I would have just been glad to get through that day and been like, you know, this is way more than I ever thought it was going to be. And kind of scary. A lot. I mean, people are afraid of creating things that are, you know, 10% as risk possible as this is. And you have been able to do that and not only do it, but do it well and do it in a way that does look like the wheels came off the bus, right? Like in a lot of ways, like because you just go with things. But that, I don't know. I visited Joelle and it's just there's such a flow to it. And it's not like overly monitored or strict and what's happening, but yet the kids are safe and it allows for so much expansion and uh, basically to let what comes up come up. Was there ever a time that you were really afraid, like, oh God, this has gotten away from me?
You want to hear a wild one?
I do.
I had heard about this program called the SAGE Project. Does anybody know? It's in San Francisco. And the interesting thing about the SAGE Project is that it's a program for sex workers, and everybody who works in the program has been on the street. So it's not a bunch of, little white ladies going, "You shouldn't sell your body, young lady." Everybody there has been on the street. And I was like, dang, these people are real, they're
Mhm.
doing it. And there's this openness of whatever it is that you need. Do you need a clean needle exchange? Let's get that for you. Do you need a hot meal? Do you need a safe place? Do you need, mental health counseling? Um, so anyway, so I went to them and I sat down, as a little white lady going, I think we should ride horses. Which in retrospect, if I think about it, I'm like, that might be the whitest thing I've ever done in my life. But these people are fundamentally kind. And we do have a lot of data that says this is helping people heal deep wounds within themselves. And so I was talking with the founder, and this woman walks in and she's got like nails out to here and jewelry dripping here and hair up to here and they said something like, well, what do you think about this? And she says, you know, I think riding a horse sounds fantastic. And I'm like, so then I find out that they of course have a youth program, and these are children that are have been sex workers. And so we all decide we gotta serve the girls. So we come up with this idea that we're gonna take a group of the girls, and they're gonna come out and they're gonna camp 2 nights. So we're gonna have 3 days. And on the second day, I got, because I live in a little coastal town, we're gonna get all the women surfers in town, and we're gonna take these girls to the beach and they're gonna go surfing all day. And so they show up and they've got 5 girls. 4 of them are from one gang and one are from another. And they have two counselors with them. And one of them is this little Persian woman, and all the girls love her and they know her and they respect her. And this other woman walks up to me and she says, I'm going to ride a horse this weekend and I'm going to go surfing. I like my coffee hot in the morning. And also, I'm diabetic, and the girls cannot know that, but it's going to be your job to keep an eye on me. I was like,
Is this another person that's leading?
counselor, yeah, that they sent with. Yeah. So we got 5 girls, 4 from one gang, one from another. one really helpful counselor, and one person that is just going to be a drain on resources. So you go, okay, here we are. And I, typical Joelle, I've got three teenagers helping me out. And the fist fight that those girls got into was one of the most brutal things I've ever seen in my life. Like, one went over the top of the campfire and grabbed the other girl, and pulled her through the fire, ripped hair out of her head, clothes came off, and the Persian woman jumped in, and I swear, I mean, this is how I see it in my mind's eye, but she went flying out, I mean, they just physically flung her. And the diabetic woman ran away saying, I can't put my hands on these girls. And my one employee in her 20s, she and I just looked at each other, and I don't know how or why, but we ran and we got the two girls and we put them in headlocks, and we pulled them back. And I think the reason that we're alive is because none of those girls knew where they were, because they were on their phones and they were calling their gang members, going, the white ladies, have their hands on us. And the Persian woman came in and she told them very clearly, look, you girls don't want to go back to jail. You're on probation. You can't do this. You've got to calm down. So we realized that the one girl from the other gang was truly mentally ill and not on her meds. And so the Persian woman took her back to the city and took her back to a safe place. And so now we're alone with these other four girls who are really activated. And we sat up and told ghost stories all night long, right? Because they had never had an experience of sitting around a campfire. And what do you do, right? And we just leaned into the ghost stories. And then the next day, we took the girls to the beach, and we had 30 women surfers show up at the beach to support them. I mean, women just ran up and they're like, Joelle, what do you want me to do? I said, get in the water, get wet, fall down, laugh, play. And we had the best time and we rode. Um, but that fist fight and that moment, and I think, when you work with young horses, you do have to get physical, and you do understand that you've got to restrain sometimes in order to keep the horse safe or the people around them safe. And so how we managed to get the girls away from there, you just kick into that horse girl thing. And we didn't have training in restraint, and even if we did, it wouldn't have kicked in that emergency moment. But somehow we managed to get the girls away from each other before they did any more damage. But that next morning, before we went to the beach, I had gotten up early and I went for a walk because I was just processing, like, and I think I was processing what happened, what could have happened. But then I just got so deeply sad that that level of violence was so normal to
Mhm.
us. And it saddens me to this day. And I realized I was out of my league. I didn't have the training. I didn't have the supports. I went in blindly wanting to serve, and I had bitten off more than I could chew. And that was a hard reckoning for me because I'm used to seeing this through, and we did. But that was a moment where I realized, okay, I jumped in blindly wanting to help, and some bad decisions were made. Um, but we made it through. But that one, that score peg legend is, yeah, the weekend with the girls.
That's intense.
Really intense. And, I had four teenagers, right? So I had to huddle them in a tent and say, are you guys feeling safe? Do I need to get you home? Do I need to call your parents? La, la, la. And then calling the parents, getting in a private place where I could call the parents and say, look, this is what's going on.
We just had a gang fight, so you might want to come and pick up your kid because we don't know if the rest of the gang is showing up.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's an easy conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that one, that score peg legend with, feeling scared and being in a position where we were absolutely in over our heads. We tend to lean into people with autism that don't have other recreational opportunities. So we
Mhm.
do take people with a history of self-harm or, or hitting or spitting or biting. We've worked with kids where parents show up wearing, Kevlar sleeves on their arms because they're so often scratched and bitten. Um,
Wow.
um, um, it breaks my heart as a mother to think, what's it like to have a child where everybody is saying, we can't handle him. We can't take her. She's too much. He's out of control. Yeah, and we're not talking like just, can't do little league.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. We had a little boy, I shouldn't use names, but he's named Messiah. And he'd been kicked out of everything. The most physical child I've ever met in my life. So strong. He's now an amazing gymnast, but he'd been thrown out of karate and swimming and all these things. And I'm like, karmically, like, what happens if you kick the Messiah out of karate? Like,
The Messiah.
and then, of course, he left, and one of our employees was so in love with him. He's such a beautiful kid. And he left, and I came up and I put my hand around her, and she's like, "Oh my God, he's so great." And I said, "Well, he'll be back." And she goes, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Well, he'll be back in 3 days." She's like, "Joelle, come on."
Oh, God. It took me a minute. It was like, wait,
No.
what?
I,
Got it. Got it. Yep.
so
The Messiah will be back in 3 days.
I'll be right back. 3 days. But I think levity is the key. Right. Even though there's an undercurrent of keeping everybody safe and making sure that horses and other animals are also safe. But that lightheartedness is where you don't bring the energy of, I'm worried this could go so wrong. Um, uh, the most dangerous thing we do is drive on the highway, and nobody talks about that. And
Mhm.
we wouldn't, because if we thought about it, we'd never do it.
Mhm.
And so I think that's something that I register to all the time. Like,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, soccer would be a lot safer way to get recreational opportunities for a lot of the people we serve. There are a lot of easier, safer things to do. Why would we undertake something with a potential for such disaster? And then I think about, we all drive to get here. Um,
Mhm.
so Nancy's asking, did we ever have any further contacts with the girls from the gang? No. And there were privacy reasons for that. So one of the girls had such a transformative experience in the water that the local surf club actually bought her a brand new wetsuit. And I brought it to the place, and they, as skillfully as they could, they basically said that they had lost contact with her,
Mhm.
that happens pretty regularly. So really heartbreaking. And I think that level of heartbreak for me, I decided that I wasn't going to pursue a relationship with the Sage Foundation, because I thought, I can't do this well. And so
Mhm.
serve the people that I know how to serve well. But, it hurts just saying that. And here it is 8 years later.
Yeah.
I don't give up easily, especially on people. And I was so drawn, even though that wasn't my experience.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an unsatisfying answer for me too. And I appreciate you asking it.
That makes me think about, and this is what also, you know, it's so important for us to follow our path and really do our best to become the people we were meant to become in this life, because you just hit on something that really resonated with me about why I would not be the best in something as intensive as that you are in, right? Because you're able to find to really focus on the good. And maybe, maybe I don't have as good a picture, but it's hard because you're also swimming in a lot of a lot of pain, right? A lot of lack of support, a lot of yeah, a lot of these kids would not do well in a regular school situation for themselves or for the kids around them. But where is the support? And it just made me think about how in my own life, because in my own family, there have been so many people that I have loved, but we're on such a self-destructive path that I tried often to be able to be someone that could help them or lean on or just, not from some like a on high place, but as sure you can stay with me or yeah, if I could help you with something, I'll do that. But I was barely treading water myself. And so, not just resource wise, but energetically, when I'm trying to move out of a mindset and a dynamic that just takes people down in my family, I could not be around that and still move forward. And I had to protect myself. And I had to come to the realization that I cannot be the glue that holds another person together anymore. I can I can support people who are on that journey as well, people who are looking for how to make something work or how not all the reasons why it's never going to work and how, you know, spinning in their own story. So I think that's one of the things that stands out to me about the work you do is that there's no getting around the drag of that energy of struggle, and sometimes there aren't answers for people, and that that you're giving them this reprieve, but there's so much more need than even what you do, and being able to show up and not have that take you down is really, you were clearly meant for this, and I'm not assuming that it doesn't affect you at all.
Well, to put it in context, what we're doing at Square Peg is we're taking something that brings us tremendous joy, um, and sharing that in our space where we really have control of that space. And then because of that, we're able to offer it in this very generous feeling. But when you're talking about people being on a destructive path and you know that you can't bring them into your home, I go home at the end of the day, right? I pet my dog, I make my food, I hang out with my husband, and I have that space. Um, so I re-energize that, and then I go, and this passion that I have for the horses re-energizes that, and that's how we're able to keep that. So it's very different than saying, sure, you can crash here for a while, right?
Mhm.
That's a 24/7, and that doesn't give you a chance to regenerate, and it doesn't come from a place of joy. It comes from a place of responsibility. It comes from a place of, feeling that you owe someone something, and it's in your home. So again, I often feel like that Disneyland dad that I get to swoop in on weekends and look like, everything's great when it's not. But I focus on the fact that I am giving someone a context for joy, and they can take that into their life. Um, or a context just for rest, where once you come through the gates and you're here with the horses, you don't have to worry about those other things.
Mhm.
But it is finite. And when we first started, our first partner in the work was an amazing program called Raphael House Family Homeless Shelter in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And they were originally a Russian Orthodox church that hosted a homeless shelter. And they're about 90 years old. And in San Francisco, you are the cool kid by definition if you made it to their board of directors. I mean, these people, they know what they're doing. And the board of directors, it's your job to raise money and you stay the heck out of programs. The people running the programs are pros. And so, they would bring kids every week, and we had a relationship with the children's program coordinator. And we never knew who she was bringing. We didn't know if we were going to see, kids that were refugees. We didn't know if we were going to see kids that, had come back into the shelter, for the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time. Um, and it just when that van opened, we just figured it out from there. But I started seeing the same kids show up, and in particular this one girl, and she was getting progressively more and more sad, and you started to realize that there was a really sad story here. So I asked the children's program director, this just amazing woman, and I said, how do you do it, right? The recidivism with homelessness is huge. And you're seeing these families, and most of the families, it was domestic abuse situations, coming back time after time after time after time. Doesn't it just break your heart? And she says, no, Joelle. She says, of course it's sad. But my job is that when that family is in the shelter, I give them everything I've got. The second they step outside that door, they are a family, and I have to believe that they're going to be okay. And
Mm.
when they come back, I serve them with everything I've got. But
Mhm.
family, and I don't get into that sacred agreement.
Mhm.
Boy, I refer back to that all the time. Because then you stop judging families. Like, why are you doing it that way? Or why are you always blah, 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 blah? No, they're a family. And yes, there are times where, there's abuse, and you do have a legal and a moral responsibility to step in some ways. But believing that that family is going to make it and they're going to be okay is a critical core value that helps you through the day and not get overcome by the sads, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That reminds me when I started working in residential treatment with people struggling with addiction, I was, I remember like my first day and feeling this overwhelming sense of responsibility that these are some life and death situations. This is serious stuff, not just with the person, but a lot of these people have families with children. There's children involved. It's very serious, and often, you know, there was there were stories of trauma and pain and loss that some of them I wish I could scrub because it's heavy to carry. But I remember having this conversation with myself that when you're working with a group of people that are kind of similar to some of the things that you grew up with, you have to be very aware that you don't take on or project or start to become have expectations, right? You start to play out your own past history or struggles through this person. You can't put that on them. So that awareness, which sounds similar to what you're talking about, where I did the thing where it was like, I'm going to give this person everything. I will take whatever they need to unload. I will hold space with them. I will hear them. I will meet them where they are. But I have zero expectation of whether that's going to help them now, whether it's going to maybe be something they refer back to in the future, or if it's not going to change the course of their life at all. That's none of my business. And one of the therapists that I was working with said to me one day, and it was such a great piece of advice. He said, you can't be the only thing that's holding them together. Because if you are, they're not going to make it. So don't put yourself in that draining position.
Yeah. Well, and we all love to be the hero, right? Let's face it. But we have to check that privilege all the time, just like you said. And no, it's such a beautiful way to put it, that if you are the only thing holding this person together, that is not, that's a house of cards. It's
Yeah. It's a what?
unfair
Yeah.
to everyone. And so, right, you have a gift and you're giving that gift, and you don't give a gift and you go, okay, where's my gift back? You know, you're like, I'm ready for my gift back. Yeah. Yeah. We had a family ask to have coffee, and they said, look, we're older parents and we're putting together our will, and we realized that none of our siblings will ever be able to understand our child. Um, can we put you down as, yeah? And boy, that gravity fell. It was like
Oh.
so many feelings all at the same time. I'm the freaking horseback riding instructor. But what an honor, what a gift, but also what a sad reflection of our society, that's the position the family was in.
Mm.
And I had to go to my husband and say this, and just watch him like, you know, and and the only answer is yes. Um,
Mm.
because I don't want to live in a world where I would ever be that parent in a position that, what it took for them to ask that,
Mhm.
for you to just say, yeah, no, I don't think we can do that. And of course, the chances of anything happen are very, very, very small. And so just making a conscious choice to say, what a tremendous honor.
Well, you saying, and of course you say yes. I don't think that's it's an of course you say yes. I think that's a testament to you, because I think that that would completely depend on the person that was being asked, whether or not that would even be possible for them, or if that felt like a complete yes. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's a big responsibility. And I think that that's, like I said, a testament to who you are in that.
Mm. I think when you reflect on being a parent without resources,
Hmm.
that feeling completely adrift. Um, I don't want anybody to feel that. And if by saying yes, I can relieve someone of that
I
feeling,
bet.
that's what I'm here to do, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you know what that's like.
Mhm.
And I don't want anybody I care about to feel like that.
So I'm going to change directions for a second. And I want to ask you, so we talked about the biggest challenge that you've had, right? But I want to ask you, what has been a surprising positive for you that you couldn't have seen coming
Mm,
as you kept going down this road of square peg and creating this space?
like every major childhood dream I ever had has come true because of this work. Um, Working with horses, right? International travel, right? I've been able to teach this work in Thailand, in the Philippines, in Europe, um, in South America. Like all these places I read about as a kid that I never thought I would see. Um, and I've been there, um, not just as a tourist, but as an honored guest. Like, how freaking cool is that? And then reaching out for mentorship. Um, the second writer for the Spanish writing school, like, was a guest in our house and teaching us, and he's the most humble, kind, funny man. Spent Thanksgiving with us and, got really drunk at our table and was just adorable and fun. And, I got to take Dr. Jane Goodall on a horseback ride through the redwoods. Like, who does that? Who does that? Um, and and she kept like listing to the side. And I'm thinking, my 15 minutes of fame is not going to be that I'm the one who killed Dr. Jane Goodall.
No.
So she managed to live another 12 years, but I just kind of like polo checked her. I just rode up alongside her and kind of,
Popped her back in.
popped her back in. Yeah, I mean, she grew up, as a pretty privileged, English woman. So she was a pretty good writer, but she said she was so cute. She said, "Oh, I haven't been. I won't even try she did that little thing with her lip that was so cute." And she said, "Oh, I haven't been on a horse since Michael Jackson used to have me out, and we would go ride around Neverland because he wanted me to check on all of his animals." Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I mentioned this when I made the announcement that Joelle was coming on, that Joelle knows everyone, and I mean everyone. Like, we will have conversations and then she'll just start with yeah, the time that I was riding with Jane Goodall and had to hip check her back into the saddle. And I really think like you are such a beautiful testament to the idea that if you just do what you love and if you follow that and you are brave enough to move into that, there are so many things that can happen that you wouldn't have. You weren't sitting there going, I'm going to help this unruly teenager because one day, if I do that, I'm going to be hanging out with Jane Goodall, right? Like, that's not the thing. But you also live in an area in Northern California outside San Francisco where it's such a hotbed of entrepreneurs and um, scientists and lead changer, like leaders, like change makers. And so there's a lot of like really fertile ground for people who want to think outside the box and solve problems. So I really want you. I asked Joelle before if she would tell this story. I love this story so much. So can you tell the story about the benefit that you attended where Elton John was the act that you were all there to see?
Well, I have a friend. She's been a really generous donor, and one of her charities she's very serious about is the Women's Sports Foundation, which was founded by Billie Jean King. And and she had bought a table at Billie Jean King's event for the Women's Sports Foundation down in LA. And her brother has kind of a NetJets kind of company. And so we had chartered a plane to all fly down and talk about, if you're a woman athlete, like talk about an event. And they had like a major women's athlete at every one of the tables. And so we had Christy Yamaguchi and her mom at our table, and she was so charming, and her mom was adorable. And I mean, Brindy Chastain, it was just super, super cool. And we're right at the front. And Billie Jean King's best friend is Sir Elton John. And she came up, of course, we were rowdy, which I know is surprising. Um, and she said, "Look, Sir Elton absolutely hates playing small venues. It's just terrifying to him. And so, will you guys just make some noise, make it feel like a big stadium?" We're like, "Well, okay."
Yes, the right table.
And so they reel out the red piano, right? And we're like 10 feet from the piano. And then they changed the risers, and we were 3 feet from the piano. We're like, holy cow, this is happening. So, and on top of it, I was going through a time where I had really bad vertigo. So we're dancing on the table, and my husband's like on the chair, and he's basically holding me up because we promised we were going to make a lot of noise. And I'm like, I'm going to die on this table, dancing on the table. But when Billie Jean King tells you to make some noise, you're going to make some noise. So we did. We had a great time. And afterwards, she came over and she thanked us, and she said, "That was really kind. I asked you to do it. Clearly, you guys made a lot of noise." She said, "Look, um, Wimbledon is in June. June. Um, and Sir Elton's uh, his big white tie and tiara benefit at his house is in June. Will you be my guest at my table?" And we went, "We're going to a party at Elton John's house?" Okay. Brian Wilson was
Oh
the
my gosh.
and so here we go. And so of course, being a girl, you're just like, Jesus Christ, what do I wear? And I ended up, I went with a friend to this little dress shop in San Francisco called Jeremy's, and they also have like a vintage and a consignment. I went to Elton John's house in a dress I bought for $40. And it was ridiculous. I mean, talk about feeling like Cinderella. Like, I do not fit in this room. And it was as we were coming in, like the paparazzi jumped up and they're hitting the windows of the van as we're coming in, trying to take pictures. And we're like, should we tell them we're not Madonna?
No.
No, we'll let them figure it out. It was ridiculous. They Chopard was one of the big sponsors because it was, for his AIDS charity. And so we're sitting there, looking like country bumpkins because my mouth is hanging open. And anybody who knows my husband knows that he's never met a stranger and nobody intimidates him, right? And so I look up, and Bill Clinton is standing like right over the top of us. And Darius jumps up and he's like, "Darius Dunlap, at us at Silicon Valley, at Silicon Graphics, and blah, 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 blah." And he's having a conversation with Bill Clinton, and I'm just like fixing my dress, like, junior prom. And it was just silly. And as you walk in, Sir Elton just grabs you in his arms and gives you a big,
Mm.
and it was otherworldly, so shall we say. And people, as you drive in, because his place is right across from the Queen's Country Place out in Windsor.
Hmm.
People are tailgating these pubs, and they're all just sitting out on the lawn drinking and watching, all the limos come in, and watching the celebrities and cheering everyone as they go in.
No way.
It was just the wildest experience. It was wild. It was very, very, very sweet.
Did he play at all at the
He doesn't like to play for small venues, so he came out and he sang "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me."
Mm.
Made somebody else play the piano for him. Can you imagine the pressure of playing the piano for Sir Elton John at his house?
Nope.
Nope. And the man, he's got to be in his late 70s now, and just from singing so long, his chest has to be this thick. I mean, he's just a megaphone, and he sang, to this huge tent without a microphone, and I mean, he blew your hair back. He really did. He really did.
So the moral to the story is that dancing on tables can open doors you would never imagine.
There you go. There you go. And you get the chance to dance on a table, even if you have vertigo and you're in stupid high heels. Yeah. Be in a $40 dress at Elton
Yeah,
John.
yeah, hey, hey.
I still
Nobody's
have that
judging.
$40 dress. It's in a box because what are you going to do? Yeah.
It's the Elton dress.
It's the Elton dress. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things about doing what you love and also being a little type A, maybe a little type A, is that you may find that you don't always prioritize yourself and maybe your needs, your recharging, your um, the things that after a while may not be getting as recharged as they were before. So you recently decided that you were going to take a real big gamble and entrust the people that you had built around you to run things temporarily while you went on sabbatical. So, can you share that with us and what traveling did for you in your whole view of yourself and the world?
Yeah. Um, I had been trying to write the succession plan for Square Peg. Like, what happens if Joelle's not around? Because now it's not just Joelle's little, backyard program. There are people whose paychecks and livelihoods depend on this, and and I couldn't make it real. I couldn't imagine not being at Square Peg. I just couldn't take off that cloak and do it. And of course, there's always, something else you need to do, even though it was critical. And even though I had seen organizations ultimately fail because they didn't have a succession plan. Um, so I have a friend here in town who runs a program for migrant workers, very successful program. And she had gotten a grant to take a sabbatical, to just take 3 months off, to just step away and let the team and see what they were going to do. And we talked about it. And she said, I have two fears. One, that they won't want me back after 3 months, and two, that I won't want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked through why those were real fears. And then I went, I have to put my organization to the test this way. This is really critical. And holy cow, who am I if I'm not the ED of Square Peg? Like, because I don't know, because it's been 20 some odd years and it's what I do and it's how I'm viewed socially and professionally. And I thought, I owe this to myself. And I also realized that I was deeply, deeply, deeply tired.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you love what you do doesn't mean it's not hard. And doesn't mean that, because I ran it like a startup for the first 15 years, so it was 70-hour weeks and you never took time off and la la la.
Mm-hmm.
Holidays didn't exist. So I took a big gamble and we didn't get the grant for me to have a sabbatical. So I asked the board, I said, this is what it's going to cost to do a sabbatical. And and they said, absolutely, let's do this. And it was terrifying. It felt like stepping off into the void. And I realized that I managed the organization like a mom. I had hired smart young people who looked up to me, that I was, I had that kind of parental space that I was very comfortable in, that it was easy for them. Some of them were, teenagers that had volunteered for us that then went off to college and came back and worked for us. So we were all very comfortable in those roles. But what happens when you raise children is they become adolescents and they're horrible for a while because they're growing and they're changing and they're being different from you. And I had to realize Square Peg will never be the same when I come back from sabbatical, and that has to be okay. Um, and so that was terrifying. And what we do does have the potential for someone to get hurt, and it would be
Mhm.
completely out of my hands if someone got hurt. And then we had to come up with the rules for, when to contact Joelle, and people, sweet. And they're like, well, I know you're going to want to hear when someone does something really cute and la 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 la. And I did a little research and I came back and I said, okay, here's the rules. Unless a board member, an employee, or a horse dies, reach out for 3 months. And my best horse died 3 weeks in. And there was nothing anybody could have done. It was a violent, sudden colic. Everybody did exactly what they needed to do, including the horse. And to be sitting in a hotel room in South Africa at 3 in the morning with our vet, who's one of my dearest friends, sobbing because, he had actually brought the horse to us years ago. And there was nothing I could do. And to be that helpless, and realize that the show's going to go on regardless was a big growing moment.
Mhm.
But I did travel far and wide. I know a lot of the people here are familiar with everybody's favorite human, Jane Pike. I stayed at Jane's in New Zealand for a couple of weeks. What a treat that was. Stayed with some friends in Argentina, played polo in Argentina, ate myself silly in Argentina. Um, Spent a very bizarre week in Cape Town, South Africa. I wrote a lot. I finished the first draft of the next book while I was on sabbatical. Um, Traveling alone is obviously it's a privilege. It is so informative. You learn so much about yourself, and it's something that I always saw myself doing. I was a reader as a kid, and I would travel in books all the time, and I always, traveling with a partner is brilliant. Traveling with a group is fantastic. Traveling alone is important, and it will be hard. There was what, 36 hours stuck in an airport in Brazil that was that I don't want to do again, and having to bribe my way out in really bad Portuguese. Um, but I did it.
Mhm.
And so it was a transformative experience. I have never, I was working at 14, I was a mom at 16. Um, I've never had the luxury of time. I've never woken up for 100 days in a row and gone, I wonder what I should do today. Maybe I'll finish that book. Or maybe I'll go for a walk, or maybe I'll take up bird watching or drawing or. And I was never bored, ever, not for a single moment. Um, it was, again, I recognize it's a tremendous privilege. Um, but yeah, traveling alone will change you. I am now officially, I flew the first part of the trip um, is I was going to Buenos Aires through Santiago, Chile. And you think when you live in California and my folks are in Alaska, you think you know what big mountains look like. The Andes, holy cow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like if you took the Sierra Nevada and the Rockies and about eight other mountain ranges and squished them all together, you'd have a portion of the Andes. It's a bigger world than you think and a smaller world than you think.
Hmm.
Um, and anyway, I could go on and on about that, but um, sabbatical. But of course, I had only successfully taken one other 2 week vacation in my life. I'd taken a few long weekends and a couple of week-long vacations, and a lot of working vacations and a lot of traveling for work. But I had taken one other 2 week vacation ever where I was actually off work. So to go from that context to 3 months, it just felt so generous.
And where did you visit?
First, I went and stayed with some friends outside of Buenos Aires in Argentina.
Hmm.
And they have a polo guest ranch and a whole like green living experience where they have sheep and cows and bees and gardens. And we just dug things out of the garden and, and Enrique would go out and this herd of sheep. I'm not a big meat eater, which means what the heck was I doing in Argentina?
Yes, seriously.
We're in Rome, right? And you have to be a good guest. He would, these sheep would come in at night like chickens. He would just call them in and they would go, okay. And then he would go out and he would take a lamb and then it would be on the barbecue. And these sheep were the most peaceful animals. And, they were part of the family in this reciprocal relationship that we don't see enough, you know? And
Yeah, my cousin used to say meat comes from the supermarket. It's wrapped in plastic on a little white tray. I don't want to know anything beyond that. That's what she would say.
and they're a homeschooling family, and so just playing with the kids, and we built volcanoes and made movies, and this family, their herd of horses. Enrique had played. He has these four beautiful gray mares. He calls the four Gordas, and he played them at Palermo, and so which is like the highest level polo you can imagine. And anybody, I taught lessons to the neighbor kids on these horses.
Mhm.
Anybody could ride them. That's the level of horsemanship that this guy has. And he and I have been friends for about 20 some odd years.
Is he the one that's a really good cook?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And then he would cook and people
For
just
days, like cook just
and you just sit around the fire and you eat like from the fire. You don't sit down to a meal, it's a continuous eating experience as the food comes off the fire and it's just visiting and sharing food. And what a beautiful way of life. It's just so it's just nice, because we think that eating is everybody, in the meal and you have to clean as you go and blah, blah, blah. And if
I
you're the hostess, your kitchen looks completely, spotless by the time your guests come. Oh no, not in Argentina. And
would fit in.
yeah, and knives are such a part of the culture there.
Hmm.
It's handmade knives and everybody has knives in their belt loops. And, there was this big knife, and they had a 2.5-year-old baby, right? And the baby's sitting there. And so, me just being a mom, I just moved the knife. And he goes, no, Joelle. He said, we are a family, we are a farming family, and the baby has to be used to knives around there. You put it back. And I'm like, okay. It's just, culture things are so, they're just
Interesting.
because you look at expectations or thoughts or customs that you have, and you have to question them when you see them from a different place. So that
That's so true. All I was going to say is so that's one of the things that I think traveling, especially, and I want you to tell us the other places that you were, but traveling, it puts you in a totally different way of living this life in a culture, in a different community, in a different environment, physically. And there's something so, it's like waking up from a dream almost, where you realize that there are all kinds of ways to experience this life than the one that I'm living. And it's such an eye-opening experience and such an expansive experience, because then when you realize that, it opens a door for, well, what other ways would I want to live, if I'm not constrained by just what I'm used to, if I see that it's only limited by my imagination,
Mhm.
what could I create for myself?
Right, and things that you didn't realize you had a choice about, you know?
Yes.
You just make these assumptions based on how and where you live and with whom. Um, yeah, travel changes you, and I just feel so fortunate to and to experience it not as a tourist, but as a guest in someone's home, and of someone's family, and to just be absorbed by dear friends into their family. It was, yeah, super, super, super special. Um,
So you hit New Zealand with Jane Pike.
mhm,
You
mhm.
mentioned that you hit Africa. So are we missing anywhere? Argentina, New Zealand, Africa?
Brazil, I was just supposed to be flying through Sao Paulo, but because I was going through Brazil, it turned out that they wanted me to have a yellow fever vaccine.
Ah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, you told me that story. This is where the bribe came in.
Yeah, yeah, because apparently South Africa was requiring a yellow fever for anyone coming from Brazil, because there's yellow fever up by Iguazu Falls in Brazil. And had I gotten the vaccine like that day, it would have been another 10 days before I could have traveled. And so I knew that there was no chance whatsoever that I'd been exposed to yellow fever. So I managed to get a doctor's note, um, and finally fly out of Brazil. And then I had booked, so South Africa had always been big on my list. And understand that my dad was terrified about me traveling alone. It was the cutest thing. And so he demanded that I let him, find me on my phone. And so he was tracking me across the planet.
Wow.
So, I'm getting these notes when I'm in Brazil going, aren't you supposed to be on your way to. And anyway, so I had there was a there was a little town way down at the southern tip of South Africa, and seeing the Cape of Good Hope and swimming in those waters around the Horn was something that I really wanted to do. And seeing two major ocean systems come together, um, and then
Just
just,
a,
yeah.
just a side note. Joelle swims in the freezing ocean like every day or something. Like yeah, yes, yes, Charlie. Yep. Swims in the freezing ocean and loves it. Like, anyway, go on.
So I went to South Africa, and I had booked in this little tiny town south of Cape Town, this little beach town, because I wanted to swim and I wanted to see Table Mountain National Park. I knew I only had a week. And so I wasn't going to get to see the Big Five or anything, but I wanted to be close to the water. I wanted to swim there. I was hoping to meet Craig Foster, who I'm a huge fan of, when I was down there, and we had a mutual friend, and he's doing a big nonprofit thing, and I wanted to help him, and then I wanted to swim. Um, and I booked a nice room with a little ocean view and this veranda. And I finally get there, 2 days later than I'm supposed to. And they show me to my room and they show me the veranda and they're like, "Oh, but you have to close all the windows and all the doors at night. You can't sleep with this open. And if you go out onto the veranda, you have to close the door behind you. And if you go in to use the bathroom, you have to, because the baboons will come in your room and tear stuff up." And you're like, "What?" And they're like, "Oh no, the baboons will swing off of this pole into your room and tear up your room. And we won't be responsible if the baboons tear stuff up." So you say, "Okay." And but the baboons weren't the dangerous thing in South Africa. So I wanted to, I booked this room specifically so I could hike up into Table Mountain. And so I started to head out and hike, and people would stop me and say, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I was going to go into the national park." And they said, "You're alone?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "You can't do that." Um, and and so I would go back to the room and sit on my veranda with the door shut, and you would watch these busloads of, white people go by to go on their tours. And really, the only way to see the national park is with a big tour. And it's just, I think as Americans, it's hard for us to understand um, the danger. And I tried to plan it different ways, and I got really down. I was mad at myself for planning badly. I was mad at, being stuck, which I don't like. Nobody does. Um, but I was just also mad at this world that is so have and have not, that made me, a big target and made somebody feel so desperate that that's how they made a life.
What
And
do you mean by that?
it was very clear that had I gone another, quarter mile on that trail, I would have been mugged.
Mugged. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you just sit with, okay, here I am in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
This could come in my room.
Mm-hmm.
The scariest and people are like, "Why are you swimming in that water? There's great white sharks there."
Mm-hmm.
But it's the humans that are the most dangerous predator, and that it's the economic situation that we have set up that have made the predatory nature of the humans. And Africa's hard, like, and then I would walk down to the penguin sanctuary, and you'd hear, children singing and dancing in a traditional way. And you're like, "Oh, that sounds so beautiful." And then you would see this sign that says, "Don't give any money to the dancers because they just buy drugs with it." And so you never know. It's so hard, I think, for an American. We're so used to, this is the sticker price and maybe we'll negotiate a little bit, but everything is a negotiation and you have no idea whom to believe, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody has a different story.
Mm-hmm.
There's this undercurrent of danger that runs through things. And your cab driver, forgets that he drove you yesterday and he told you a completely different version of his story than
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and he gave you a completely different price, but he's going to call his boss and see if
Right.
there's a better price for you. And as an American, we don't operate like that. And this
Mm-hmm.
trust and this, it was it was a lot to think about. But I think I was angry at myself for not planning well. And I had a really good friend who went in the Peace Corps, um, in rural South Africa. And she said, and this is where my potty mouth comes in, but she said, "South Africa is a complete mind fuck. You just can't understand the disparity between the have and the have-nots and the
Mm-hmm.
violence that runs through. It's really hard to wrap your head around." So
Mm-hmm.
and then to go from there to the South Island of New Zealand, where there are no predators, where nobody locks their house. I walked by a car and the keys were in the door of the car in town. Um, like adults ride their bike to the coffee shop and drop their bike like on the lawn, like a bunch of 10-year-old kids,
I just
And I'm thinking of stealing their bike. I don't know.
the temptation is real.
It's in my head. So again, culture and geography and so to go from a place where predation is reigns supreme,
Hmm.
go to a place that has no natural predators, where
Hmm.
birds fly up and almost land on your shoulder. I mean, it's wild. Um, it's a big world. It's an
Yeah.
amazing, beautiful world. And until I was in it, I wouldn't it wouldn't have occurred to me that that is the case. And then just think like, you know, how do horses perceive life in
Hmm.
a place with no natural predators? But it turns out that the grasses aren't really designed for horses there. And so you're constantly trying to figure out how to keep the grasses from killing your horse.
Wow.
So it's a it was just eye-opening in so many ways. And I've never been into birds, and everyone will think that going to New Zealand and hanging out with Jane was the bird thing. Argent frickin' Tina for the birds. I've
Really?
never seen anything like it. I've
Whoa.
never, ever, ever seen so many birds until last weekend, but that was another thing here in California. But the variation of birds, the number of birds, it was so cool. So
Never knew that, but put that down. Argentina for birds.
Argentina for birds. Didn't know. Didn't know.
So, how do you feel all of that travel and that time? Tell us about coming back from it. How did it shape you coming back? What did you find when you came back and face that what's different?
It was rocky at first. There was some territory staked out.
No. Some
Uh,
flagpoles put in the ground.
flagpoles put in the ground, and we had some healing to get past that, and but it demanded of me to be a much more upfront leader. I came back with a lot less drama tolerance, having not been in any drama for a while, and I'm just not gonna have that. And and in my team's defense, it was a culture that I had built where there was a certain amount of drama, and I just went, yeah, I'm not gonna live that way. And
Isn't that interesting? Like when you realize, like, oh,
yeah,
I built this. Like this is the way I built it. And now that I'm away from it, I can look at it more objectively, like, oh, I don't want to create this anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that meant that I had to be a lot more upfront. I had to be not nearly as confrontation averse, you know.
Oh, yes.
Skillful about it, because it's not my plan. But I think my big shift, and you and I have talked about this, I thought as I grew the organization, because it's an organization based on care and caring. I thought my job as the executive director was to make our employees' jobs easier.
Mm.
Any way I could. Can I take some pressure off here? Can I do a little extra here? Can I make this easier on you so that you will fill in that space with more? And it turned out that that was, this is a big word, but insulting, in maybe infantilizing.
Mm.
It was restricting growth. It may have been imparting that I didn't feel like people were capable. So my shift was, it's not my job to make their job easier. It's my job to make sure they have the resources to do a job they're really proud of.
Wow.
And, I had to journal that, write that
I can only imagine.
a lot. But, because who doesn't want to do a job they're proud of, you know? And so just finding where people are at, making sure they have the resources and reminding them, nudging them like, what makes you proud about this?
Mm-hmm.
And then growing that. That was a big, big, big shift. But it was rocky at first. We'd hired a sabbatical consultant. She was a really, really, really nice woman. But of course, it was her job to just hear everybody,
Mm-hmm.
hearing people. Um, and we had some team members who were just basically like, we like her more than you. Go to work for her, like enjoy that. And I'm like, of course you do. All she has to do is say, "Ooh, I hear you. Tell me more about that."
Yeah.
I thought, and I was kind of stinky about it for a while. And then I went, wait a minute. Maybe that means they're not feeling very heard by me.
Mm.
I got to work on that. And so when I say it was sticky, there was still a lot of growing. And I also had to come back and because I had some perspective, I needed to re-steer the ship a few ways.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of hurt feelings, and there was a lot of you don't trust us. And I said, no, it's not that I don't trust you, but here's these accountability systems, and we're going to build these in. And they're like, well, we don't work that way. Well, we have to, because we have to grow and we all have to be accountable. So that was and we're not there yet. One thing that they do tell you about sabbatical is it takes a year to reintegrate from being gone 3 months. Um, but I have changed my work pace,
Mm-hmm.
and mostly because I'm not constantly trying to micromanage everybody's job.
Mm-hmm.
I trust them with their responsibilities. I acknowledge what they're doing, but I realize I don't need to be in the nitty-gritty of every single decision. So I have more space, and that's given me a much healthier um, pace
Mm-hmm.
had before. So suddenly we're not operating like a startup all the time. And that was all I knew was startup energy. I didn't know how to be a grown-up organization. So
Which I thought you were so grown up. I thought you were so grown up.
I haven't.
You said something earlier that I just want to point out. You said about being conflict adverse or confrontation adverse. And it's really hard to be a good leader in our lives. It doesn't, you don't have to be running an organization, in your personal life, it's really hard because in the words of Rush, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And when we avoid, then what can happen is then people don't trust us because by not addressing things, then something has got to give, right? Then either some bad behavior continues or something that is needed is not brought into the picture. So, and a lot of times, and tell me if this is true for you, like a lot of times we make it up in our mind the story that we think everything is confrontational, even if it's just telling the truth about something or giving feedback, that everything is confrontational. And a lot of times when you think it's going to be confrontational, you bring confrontational energy into the conversation and the person is confused because you've already created the story. So if you go in and from a place of, instead of being the oak tree, be the grass that blows in the breeze, right? Don't have a lot of push, just have it be free and clear of any projections and see what happens. Because so many times we obsess about something and we're in the maze about it for like ever, it could be months. And then we finally address it. And the person's like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And you're
Right.
like, wait, what? Really?
Yeah, really.
This is
Really?
not a thing. All of the like, who do you think you are? And you, oh, like all the story that we were afraid of just
I
doesn't.
always and you never. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, Bridget asked, has that thought transferred to your horsemanship at all? 100%. So I actually, the next book is actually called Take the Reins, and it kind of ends with me heading off on sabbatical. Um, and we started working with through the Rescued Hearts film. They introduced me to a guy named Patrick Sullivan, Patrick and Avery Sullivan, and and they're Liberty trainers, and they'd taken like 6 or 7 of the worst rescue horses they could find, horses that their next option was to be put to sleep. And they said, we're only going to do Liberty with them. And within a year, every single one was not just rideable. They were the kind of horse you want to ride. And they did everything with Liberty. And if you know a little bit about my story, you know that I grew up, um, from I think I was galloping racehorses at 17, and that's everything's in your hands, and you have a big hold on a running horse, and your worth is, can you hold a tough one? Can you keep him
Mm.
from running off? Can you? Um, and and as a result, exercise riders are some of the most physically strong people you'll ever meet in your life. Their backs, their shoulders, their and so it's as a rider, I am, no matter what I wanted to do, I am very handsy, and
Mm.
I hold things and I shape things and I move things, and yes, I work on my hands, but my go-to place is to pull the horse around or do this and communicate to the horse through the bridle. And with Liberty and bridleless, suddenly that goes away. And you're going to ask the horse for a turn, and he may drop his shoulder and he may fall in, and you can't fix it. You can't just, and how much anxiety and panic came up in my body doing that was really revealing, and thinking how that translates into how I thought about life, that I had to
Mhm.
control it and I had to fix it as it was happening, as opposed to, if you want the horse to turn, say, to the right and you're bridleless, you need to be in the right position to help him make a balanced turn, because once he starts going, there's nothing you can do about it. And so it's much more about preparation, and it's much more about getting along, and it's much more about what you do when things go wrong, because it will. And
Mm-hmm.
holy cow, talk about a revolution in how I felt about riding and how I felt about my horses, and how ridiculously generous and patient they are with us. And then, through Warwick's whole group, getting to know Dr. Stephen Peters, and then I actually went and did his brain dissection clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a chance, it's in 2 days. I learned more about horses in those 2 days than I probably have in the last 10 years. And just like with us, the quickest way to panic in a horse is restraint. You
Mm-hmm.
Racehorses my whole life, and we put lip chains on, we put chifney bits on. I started racehorses for a living, and it was all about restraint, and you realize that that always translated into panic and anxiety in the horse. And not that, there are some great racehorse riders out there, and like one of my oldest friends was one of the best exercise riders in the world, and she always finessed a horse. How she did it with a racehorse was just amazing, right? And she could handle horses nobody else could handle, because her energy was chill,
Mm-hmm.
loved them, and she trusted them enough to go on a long rein and use their body and be balanced and put their head where they needed their heads to be. and, just kind of put her brain into their brain and heart. And, uh, and so she wasn't thinking about restraint. She was thinking about inviting the horse into this space. Imagine, being on an 1,100-pound racehorse with a wall of horses coming behind you at a dead run. And she's able to stay calm and just go, you know what? You can stay at this pace. We're just going to angle out a little bit and let them go by. That's talent. And there are people at the racetrack who have that talent. I was not one of them. Um, and so anyway, so yes, it absolutely translated. And so I did. I named the memoir Take the Reins.
It's a
And
great name.
thank you. Playing around with bridleless riding has been an absolute and in Liberty work, just inviting the horse to be in a space. And when it goes wrong, just, what comes up for you with that? Because yeah, yeah.
You know, I just got back from doing a retreat at the Schiller's Journey on Ranch with Jessica White Plume. And one of the exercises we did was you go in and we were doing like a meditation with the minis, the two mini horses. But it wasn't the meditation that was the biggest transformational aspect of it. There were some parameters that everyone had to follow. And the the biggest one was you can't touch them.
Mm.
No go, oh, cute horsey, petty, petty, right? Like you have to just sit there and let the horse engage with you. And what's interesting about that is that you realize how much being in constant motion and action takes you out of being present and experiencing the other being right in front of you. So by not being able to do all of the old patterns and to sit there, the presence of the horse showed up so much bigger because now you're greeting them not as, oh, cute little pony, especially like the condescending for the little guys, right? Like, oh, so cute. Um, Now you're seeing them as autonomous, fully actualized beings, and they're sharing breath, and they're, you know, nuzzling hearts, and they're doing their stuff, making their way around. And it was very hard for some people. Um, I think it was more difficult for people who were very involved in horses in a way of training horses or competing with horses, or there's that disconnect. And it was very interesting. So yeah, when you take away all the ways that you're used to engaging that take action or pressure or any of the things, and you take that away, it shows you a lot.
Yeah, it does.
So
Yeah.
I know we're reaching the end of our time, and I wanted to ask you um, if you could maybe just give us a little bit about your work on the Rescued Hearts film, because you were featured on that film and I got to see it in Santa Barbara when they had the first screening, and you got to go on stage and talk about it. And so what do you want people to know about that experience and what you took away from that?
Um, so it was Carrie Lake who initially um, connected us to Rescued Hearts, and when they called, I was trying really hard to get them to go and talk to somebody in Arizona. I didn't.
You told me that story. You were like, "Why are you going to come here? There's plenty of places in Arizona that you can talk to."
And they were very sweet. They're like, that's really sweet, but we want to do this. And Carrie was living in the area, so they were going to be able to interview Carrie at the same time. And then so they worked really hard on this film, and there was so much that didn't make it into the film. And the one that breaks my heart. So how they convinced me to do this is they also wanted to film Jim Masterson. And so I worked the angle and I'm like, well, why don't you just have, because Jim was going to be in California, why don't you have Jim just come out here and you can film him here? It's quite pretty and we're over on the beach and la la la. Also thinking I get to hang out with Jim Masterson and I get to ask him to put his hands on my horses, right? And the stuff with Carrie and the stuff with Jim didn't make it into the film. And that breaks my heart because they're both, really, really wise people. Um, but I got to spend a lot of time with Jim, and he and Sandy Breberg, and the other woman whose name I'm missing. She was so wonderful. Um, they they put their hands on every single one of our horses, because we are Square Peg Ranch. Our horses are square pegs. They're horses that couldn't find, for whatever reason, a sport home, and really needed another chance. And I've got one that is a complete conundrum, and and Kathy's helped me with this horse too, and he's just really tricky. And so Jim worked with him for like 3 days, and he was a raging bear the first couple of days. I mean, this horse, you raise your hand to touch him, and he's been with us for 6 or 7 years. It's not an abuse situation, unless there's something I don't know about, and he will come at you with his teeth. And Jim being Jim, just the Buddha master that he is, really, found his way and helped me understand some of the parts that this horse was holding a lot of tension. Um, if that's just two people that I know of that didn't make it into the film, I imagine that there's quite a few others. But they did. They worked hard. And what I like about the film is that they're working on a lot of heavy subjects. So Rescued Hearts is really a look into why are horses healers. And these two ladies are a couple, and they had made a film a few years ago about their journey through. One of the women had an autoimmune disease that was very painful, and Western medicine didn't have many answers. And they
Mm.
made the film about them looking at different healing modalities, and how it affected both of them, and I thought that was really beautiful, that this other partner is witnessing her partner in pain and scared, and how is that for her? And so they really opened up the fourth window, and and it's a lovely film. And then through that work, they kind of stumbled onto horses, and they're like, wait a minute, there's this whole world about what horses are doing. And I think what's unique about the film is neither of them are horse people. In fact, as they say, we don't even have a dog or a cat. We don't even have a house plant. Like, we are not you guys. And so they're coming in with a fresher look than we have, people who spend time with horses all the time. Um, and uh, um, and they're very vulnerable. Again, it's a lot about this emotional and physical healing journey for the one woman, and then her partner, in seeing her through, you know, how to come to terms with her story, with some past trauma. And so they weave that into the story as they look at other people. But the square peg bit is very humorous, and
Mm.
um, one particular part is quite humorous, and I think the other big laugh in the film is a couple of things that Nishan Cook says. And the fact that they were able to, of course, they're, it's nothing but, attractive women and horses and green grass. And then they go out to Nishan's place and it's winter and the horses are hairy, and the
Hmm.
old, and they managed to show really the beauty of Nishan and how he thinks about things. And he's not gonna body clip the horse because someone's coming to film, right? He's Nishan. He's gonna do what's right for the horse. And what they did is they captured his lightness of spirit and his silliness, and they did that with a couple of our families that we serve too. So I really appreciated that that the little light moments in kind of the trauma stories that were coming up showed up in the square peg bit, and also with Nishan, because that was it was a it was a generosity and a kindness to not take themselves so seriously.
Mm.
But there's another film that'll hopefully be out next year that I'm really excited about that we factored into, and that's a film you can see a trailer called The Future of Normal. And it's a film about neurodiversity. And the filmmaker has realized that there are a lot of people in prison who are neurodiverse and how they've
What a
been
surprise.
weird. And she talks to a couple of people. And it's just really this idea of othering that we do with neurodiverse people, or people who think differently, or people who learn differently, and what a detriment that is, not just to the individual, but to society. And where are we going with that? And
I would jump in and say we other everyone.
we other everybody
We other everyone.
else.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's nobody that hasn't been othered,
Yeah,
right? Even the jokes about white women, even the jokes about old white men. Like there's this constant othering. And for me, I feel like the idea of not othering each other anymore in any way is the direction that people are starting to go now. And I think it is a cleaning house because, you know, when certain groups get othered in a way that is systemic and unfair and causes great tragedies, the pendulum starts to swing in, our evolution the other way. But then that can actually then it just becomes who's got the power now, because now that I have the power, I'm going to other people, and the goal should be that we're not othering anybody. So I think I think that it stifles people from being able to have conversations that really change perspectives, just like we're talking about traveling and realizing that, yeah, like leaving the knife around and teaching the 2-year-old to respect it because there's going to be knives around. That's the way we operate, which might be different. So being able to expand ourselves and to have conversations and not fear that we're going to get caught up and ask a stupid question or say something that is now going to people are going to put us in a box of, a judgment about us. And so in that line, all the stuff, by the way, I know somebody asked a question, everything that we talked about is going to be in the show notes. Like I'll put this in so that, any of the movies or anything, you'll be able to get more information. But in line with this, somebody that knows nothing about autism or the clientele that you work with, after 20 plus years of working with this clientele, what would you want them to know that they might be too afraid to ask?
the shortest answer to that, because as we all know now, 2 hours later, I'm not big on short answers, is always assume intelligence. Um, it's just, yeah, because like you said with the minis, right? When you suddenly see the mini as their own sovereign being, it's completely different than, oh, aren't you a cutie little bit. When you see someone who for whom speech is difficult, And that may be because of a language barrier. It may be a stroke. It may be autism. When, because people are like, well, we got a AAC device and he's really in there. Of course he's in there. Of course he's in there. Always assume intelligence imparts a dignity, a curiosity, and and a willingness to know.
Mhm.
It's that horse that gives you the cold shoulder over and over again. Yeah, you can put a halter on him and go lunge him and chase him around with a stick, and eventually it'll probably turn towards you. But if I always assume intelligence, I say, what's going on here? Is there a reason he always turns away? Is there something that he needs? Hopefully you're not like, is there something I'm bringing to this that is aversive for the horse? So the short version is always assume intelligence. And I don't think you can go wrong there. Um, yeah.
That was one of the biggest takeaways that I got when I visited you.
Mm.
And what I realized was that, our brains are computers. So we're taking in pieces of information and we're creating from our limited view and experience how best to be in a situation. And there were two boys coming the day I was there. And you said to me, they really hate when people talk down to them. You know, talk to them like you would anybody else. And when someone it has trouble verbalizing and maybe they speak very much in the patterns of like someone that is 5 years old in the pattern, right? In the 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 process of speech, right? It's not as advanced, let's say. And maybe they don't look you in the eye or look down. There can be this, like my brain would go, oh, so they're slower in understanding. So I might start talking to them really slow like this or start, did you like that? Right. Because I'm mirroring, because this is what we do. I'm mirroring, but that's not what's going on inside for them. So I was so grateful for you to give that to me and let me in on that. And then, we talk about the telepathy tapes and all of this stuff that's like there's just more information coming out now about how deep and rich these people's experience of life are that isn't reflected to us in ways that we would quantify and understand, but it's there. And you taught me that before any of this. So thank you. And I think that's a great lesson. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing so much. There's so many things Joelle and I had talking about that we never got to. So to be continued.
Saved and so grown up here.
You're so good.
I know. So, Christine, after the journey on Summit, and I was a basket case. I knew that my presentation at the summit was going off the beaten path. I knew I was taking some real risks, and I was really, really, really wrapped up in it. And so I wasn't really present like I wanted to be for meeting people. And and so I get this phone call from Christine, or maybe it was an email, just basically going, "Hey, I found really cheap flights up from LA, and you have this airport up by your Sonoma location. It's the Snoopy Airport or something. It is the Charles M. Schulz Airport. It really is the Snoopy Airport. And I'm just flying up, and I'm just going to come stay with you. And that's what I do. I'm kind of a stalker sometimes, but it'll be all right." And I'm like, "Gee, okay."
I invited myself to go and stay at Joelle's house.
And there's the neighbor by our Sonoma location has this beautiful vacation home that they let us use sometimes. And so I asked for it and we had this slumber party and we were like 12-year-old girls. We stayed up all night long, just like curled up on the bed, like braiding each other's hair, telling stupid stories and like, oh my God, that makes me think of something else. You could finish your story and then I'll tell you mine. That went all night long. We get up the next morning, we're making coffee. My phone rings. I look at her and I'm like, this isn't good. And I find out that one of our horses has died. And like she goes from, 12-year-old girl braiding your hair to like awesome, amazing, like hold space for me moment. Um, and we had like 10 years of friendship in a weekend. And I'm just so glad that you reached out because I was really not there at that first summit that I went to. And it was so good to go back the next year and actually be a human rather than a speaker. Um, so I'm just really grateful for that group of people for whom a bunch of you guys are part of. And yeah, yeah. And that I've gotten to know so many of you on such a deep level. So here's the connections.
Here's to connections. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I will put all of Joelle's contact details and movie info and book info and all of that stuff in any of the notes. And if anybody here is thinking about traveling to some exotic places, and if you've been in a cave and haven't heard, Kathy and I are going to Bali again in January, and we have about 2 spots left. So here we go. Anybody, if you want that expansion, you can join us. Thank you, Joelle.
Thank you. Thank you. So fun.
Thank you so much. This was great. This was great. All right, everybody, I'll see you next month. Who knows if it'll be the first Friday, because that just seems to be like a suggestion. But I'll see you next month and I'll have another great guest.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.